Hello everyone, this is Mike at Bristlink Miniatures, and thank you for stopping in, and if you're new here, welcome. Today's video is going to be a little different than my previous ones. We are going to go over more of a what happens when things don't go according to plan. There's going to be a whole lot more of my thought processes and how I approach a project when things go drastically different than I was expecting the project to go. It's going to be more of that and less of an actual painting techniques video. So a little backstory, I decided to go ahead and print out a 6-scale Nebula from Guardians of the Galaxy. I picked this model because I love Guardians of the Galaxy, I love the characters there, and this particular model I thought had a really interesting pose and an interesting base, although it's quite a bit of the model is base, which we'll get into. And it just, the whole model just kind of spoke to me. This particular model is from a Patreon that I hadn't previously done any of their prints, any of their models before, so this is definitely a new creator for me. So we'll see here as we go along what the issues are. The model itself printed fine. Had the typical supports marks that need to be removed, and that's not really where the issue was. Where the issues started to creep in is the fitting, how this model was cut and keyed, and the amount of really drastic gaps that were left over. The gaps between her belt, around her waist, between her legs, where the two legs come together all the way around there. So significant gapping there, which normally you could go ahead and use techniques like milliput, green stuff, resin, and fill those gaps in, and it's not a big deal. However, with this particular model, there's a lot of very fine texturing in those areas, especially the pants and the fabric, and it's part of why I really enjoyed the model was the detail of the textures. But double-edged sword there is when you go ahead and try to fill that, recreating that exact texture is very difficult and very, very time consuming. So there was those issues, and then in the base also, there's the bottom ring of the base where the two pieces come together, and where the ends are, it was significant gaps there. And then of course on the vertical sides of the round base, there's that, which isn't as big of a deal, although it's kind of hard to get in because of all those fins around the circle there make it a little harder to get in to get a nice smooth finish. But where those two, the ring on the bottom, where those two ends come together, it was like significant gapping to try to fill. And then the chunk of metal spaceshipy part stuff, which I have no idea what it actually is, it had obviously seams around it as well that went over every kind of a curvature and flat surface and areas like that as well that needed to be filled. So I'm looking at this model and I'm trying to decide which way do I want to approach this. And obviously my first goal was to assemble it, have it nice, tight fitting, paint it up like I would typically paint a statue of a character. But with these gaps and the difficulty to fill the gaps with the texturing, I was kind of faced with basically what I saw as 3 different choices here. Choice 1, I could just go ahead and at this point cut my losses, scrap the parts, throw them away, find another model, move on with life. I didn't like that approach because I just don't like wasting what I've printed. I had the whole entire thing printed, base, the Nebula character, all of it, and I just didn't. I didn't want to cut and run there. So I could have just also pushed forward, went ahead, filled those areas, and had these noticeably flat, untextured areas and very prominently visible areas. Also, not just around her waist and her legs, but also her neck. Her head didn't fit very well to her shoulders, and there were some gaps around the front part of her neck there, around her throat and that. But I could have pushed forward there, could have went ahead and had those flat areas painted up like normal, and been probably very unhappy with the results in those areas I had to fill. The third option, and this is the one that I decided to go with, was to take a negative and try to make it into a less of a negative, even maybe a positive, in regards of those gaps and that. And I decided to basically turn this into a statue of Nebula. So I was thinking, okay, a statue would have gaps in it, especially if it wasn't very well, quote, crafted, or if it was aged and it started to, the pieces to separate. So then I started thinking, okay, well, what materials is a statue made out of? Well, stone or metal or some other combination thereof is typical. Well, Guardians of the Galaxy, Off-World, Other Worlds, definitely thought metal was the right approach. Not just any metal. I thought there could be very interesting ways to blend in kind of some unique colors and whatnot into the statue to kind of give it more of a kind of just an interesting, unique take on a typical statue of a thing. So that's the choice I decided to go. And then when I went ahead and started doing the fillings of these gaps and that, now that I know I'm working on something that's actually going to be representative of a statue, I could have some less than perfect seam lines and make them look more like welding, like the two halves of this bottom ring of the base is welded together along the verticals, as long as that big chunk of metal spaceship machinery that she's standing on could also have imperfections in those areas to make it look like it was welded together. And of course, her body herself, having those gaps in it, just made it look like the parts of this statue that was created of Nebula made it look more like an actual statue of a statue rather than the actual character herself. Now, the footage I'm playing in the background while I'm talking about my whole thought process and how I reached my decision of going of statue of approach, I'm just showing the cleanup process, identifying where all those gaps were, and then using the technique of taking the same resin that the models were printed from, using that same resin and using it to fill the gaps with the UV light. In areas where there's significant gapping, go through multiple layers. Don't try to fill the entire huge gap with one pool of resin and then cure it. It might be too thick. So fill a little bit of the gap, do a little resin cure with the flashlight, with the UV light, and then go ahead and put another layer on and rinse and repeat until you build it up to the layer you want. A couple cases where I thought I might have actually went a little too heavy around that spaceship parts, base C part that goes on top of the ring. I actually took that out and put it in my actual curing machine that I put all my models after I print them, just to make sure that I had it fully cured, because you don't want to have any uncured or undercured trapped resin. You just want to make sure it's fully cured. So another area that is different than my previous videos as far as the order of doing things is, in this model I actually glued a lot of the parts together even before I primed it. Usually I'm doing a final assembly after everything is painted and just the last steps before the model's complete. So the reason again here is I'm trying to block these the model into the areas of different materials. So for example, I know that the bottom ring, I'm going to do one type of material for the bottom ring. The spaceship debris junk stuff that she's standing on is going to be another one. And then as far as Nebula herself, her whole body is going to be kind of like almost like a bronze statue, but not actually bronze, and we'll get into the colors in a moment. But her whole body is going to be basically one color. Her head will be treated differently, and her her arm and her hand will also be treated differently. So keeping the head, the two arms separate, the body's all being assembled here using my the E6000 super strong glue and using some super glue to hold it in place temporarily while it gives that E6000 time to fully cure, which could be like 24 up to 48 hours with that. And then the two halves of the rocket, the spaceship debris, and then the base, the bottom ring of the base. So those are the different pieces that I wanted to have assembled prior to doing any kind of painting or priming and painting. And here now you can see that her body is fully assembled, really highlighting where those gaps were that I mentioned earlier. Significant gaps around the belt and her legs, as I mentioned, and the gap here with her head as well. There's a lot of wiggle room, and that's the tab there on her neck at that skin, and it should be tighter than that. It just has these big gaps. So again, just highlighting the areas that caused me to take the statue of a statue approach rather than a traditional painting of the figure. And final assembly, putting her boots or her bottom parts of her legs onto the rest of her body. Making sure whenever you're fitting a figure to a base where both feet have the keys here, the pegs, it's always important to make sure that you have proper fitting when you're gluing this together. I struggled a little bit with her feet. I think I had to sand off a little bit of the base on her right foot to get it to fit properly. But again, this is very important to do because once you glue those legs, the last part of the legs together, and if you didn't already kind of see if there's problems here, when you do go to put that on, you will definitely have issues. So always do a dry fit before you go ahead and glue your pieces that interact with other pieces. So once I had all the pieces assembled that I wanted to at that point, I ended up taking everything and priming it with lead belcher, a rattle can of lead belcher from Citadel Paints. I don't have video coverage of that. I do all my rattle can stuff outside. It's just too much for my little paint booth to handle that. So all my rattle can stuff, like right now, I just do outside. But full coat of lead belcher, silver on all the parts, including her head, everything. And then that gives me this nice, bright, shiny, metallic base to start with, to start applying the coloring that I want on top of this to give me that statue of Nebula in a otherworldly vision that I had in my head that I was going to try and execute. And now we start moving into more of the painting techniques portion of the video, although the techniques here are very, very straightforward, very simplistic compared to some of the techniques I may have done in other videos. So if you're a beginner painter, hey, this is a great, maybe a great approach for you to start. If you're a more advanced painter, this is going to be very basic stuff, but in any regards, here we go. So after I had the lead belcher on, I used this black metal scale paint on the undersides of the spaceship debris base part and the undersides of Nebula's body, just to try to give it some little extra shadow on the metal. It may or may not have been needed, as you'll see when I put the other colors on. But the goal here was to kind of give a more of a shadow to the metal here. And to really lean into this idea of just doing more than a kind of like normal colors, trying to kind of lean into this, just not of Earth, it's Guardians of the Galaxy. There's multiple planets out there. Trying to lean into that theme. I had these Turbo Dork paints. I had a blue steel and a purple one. I think it's Purple People Eater or People Eater. And I thought this would be great because those are the two colors that Nebula's skin's made from. So like, great, this works perfect. I already had it. Never really used these paints before. They were just kind of there waiting for the day to come, and here's the day. But they're very kind of very metallic-y, but like color shift as well type paints. And so I decided to go ahead and take this round, the bottom of the base, the round portion, and do a 50-50. I'm going to do one half of it in the blue, and then do the other half in purple, and just kind of have a nice fade where the two transition from one to the other. So there's really no need to do any masking here. Literally just painting the one side blue and then after it dries, come back and hit the other side purple, and just make sure the purple has a little overspray to completely cover the silver and overlap onto the blue. So the goal here is just not have any of the silver primer left. It's either should be all blue or purple. I took several coats. It was interesting. The blue went on a lot thinner and smoother right out of the bottle, whereas the purple was super thick, and it had to reduce it down quite a bit to get it to flow. Overall, I'll come back to this towards the end of the video and give my final thoughts on how the bottom portion of this base turned out, this ring. But the goal was putting those colors here because I knew I was going to use those same colors on Nebula's face, and her one hand is blue as well. And I just wanted to have those purple and blues tied into the model elsewhere, not just at the top where obviously her head and her one hand is up towards the top of this whole model. I wanted to try to pull those colors down elsewhere to give it a little bit more of a balance. So I decided to just do this cool funky bottom basing here. Like I said, I'll come back to the end, give my final thoughts on how this portion turned out, at least my thoughts on it. Here I made the decision to airbrush the purple onto her face first, and then at this point I was still undecided whether or not I was going to mask off her purple later and do the blue, but I'm doing a really horrible job keeping this on camera here. But the idea was the purple it went down more difficult than the blue when I did the base. So I wanted to make absolutely sure I did the best I could with the purple on her. And like I said, I'm going ahead and airbrushing the purple on her face first, and then we'll come back with silver and blue after the purple dries. For Nebula's body, I used this reference image here that I'm going to throw up in the corner of the screen. And her outfit is primarily this red. It's red leather, obviously, in the photo, whereas she's not going to be, I don't want her to have a leather appearance. I want her to have a metallic appearance. So I'm going to try to go ahead and start by putting this transparent red over the lead belcher to give it more of a red metallic look than a red anything else look. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm putting it on thin. And it's already a transparent paint, so it's thin by nature as well. I'm not worried at this point about the details of a belt, or maybe her boots might be a different color, slightly like more of a brown color, or just the little bits and bobs on her that might be silver. Not worried about that. It's just more of a kind of, think of like back in the older days when they took baby shoes and had them bronzed, and they were just all bronze. That was the idea here, making her all like bronzed, but in a Guardians of the Galaxy cool metallic-y colored sense, if you will. So that's the thought process and the attempt I'm doing here with the red. And like I said, I'm just going over the entire model. We put that black metal on the undersides, and those areas will be a little darker red, but still the goal was to still have it look metallic. So some areas a brighter red metallic, and others a darker red metallic to to capture the light source and the light from the top and that. As we go through, the video doesn't capture the metallic bits the same way that I saw them in real life. So there will be a couple things here I'll do in a moment after I have the model fully painted in red. And the first one was, it looked too flat. It still had some metallic to it, but it kind of lost a lot of the glimmer from the lead belcher. So the first thing I did was I took it outside I have a rattle can of a gloss lacquer, and I hit it with that first to kind of put the shine back into it. And that certainly helped, but it still didn't have that metallic-y look to it. So what I ended up doing was taking some of a silver, a really bright silver, and literally I think I did 1 or 2 drops, and the rest of it I used this airbrush medium to really water it down, to reduce it down. I used the airbrush medium over just using water because the medium typically helps suspend the metallic flakes better than just water would. I wanted to, as I blasted this basically clear medium onto the model, I wanted those little bit of silver metallic flakes to be evenly dispersed through the airbrush. And by doing so, it actually brought the metallic look back onto Nebula's body. And at the end of the day, I think it turned out really well. Camera doesn't capture it quite the same as it is in person, but it does have a nice red metallic look without actually going out and buying a red metallic paint. So that was the way I simulated that. I decided to use this Vallejo silver. It's a super bright color. Really like these metal colors from Vallejo. I decided to use the silver color on the baton that she's holding in her one hand, as well as her entire other arm in hand, which is that cybernetic arm she has. I'd already previously went ahead and sprayed the blue onto her hand. That part's done. So now I just need to go back now, and I'm using a brush around her fingers just to make sure that I don't... we get that taken care of properly. It's not enough of an area to worry about masking. I can do it with a brush just fine. And then the rest of the baton, I'll come back in a little bit with the airbrush and spray the rest of the baton again with this bright silver. And that should take care of the 2 arms, her cybernetic arm, as well as this arm or hand holding the baton. Coming back to Nebula's head after the purple had dried, I'm taking that same Vallejo silver and metal color silver and going ahead and using a brush, and I'm going over all of the parts of the head that don't have the purple on it. And there's 2 reasons for this. One is on her left side of her head, she has a bunch of cybernetic patch areas, including it wraps around her eye a little bit, almost like a 7 of 9 kind of a style there. That area will remain this bright silver. But I'm also putting that bright silver everywhere else to help boost the blue of that blue steel turbo dark paint that I'll be putting on here in a moment. Just the brighter the undercolor, just the more I feel that would boost the blue that I'll be putting on. So just taking my time, going around, being very careful not to paint any of the purple that's already there, and going ahead and really just getting the rest of her head that really nice bright silver from that Vallejo paint. And now I'm using that turbo dark blue steel, and I went ahead and decided to brush this on. It went on really smoothly, very minimal brush strokes, and the brush strokes that I did have, I made sure I went in a direction that followed the lines of her face or the curvature, where, again, keeping in mind this is a statue of a statue, so being a statue, having some metal striations, if you will, lend itself to the credibility of it being a statue rather than a statue of an actual person, if you will. This took multiple coats. This went on very thin, and the silver shined through for the first 2 coats, and I think it was that 3rd coat that really popped in the final blue that this ended up being. But the advantages of that are it really allowed those creases and details of her head to really shine through still, so there was no risk of losing any of those fine details that was sculpted into her head and face. And to finish off Nebula's head, her eyes are definitely black in the movie, so I decided to go ahead and use this black metal. This is the same black metal that I undercoated the part of the base and her body with. So I'm going ahead and using a fine brush and putting that into her eyes. And after I got done and it dried, it looked fine. It just didn't look quite dark enough. So I went ahead and took Pro Acryl's transparent black and put a thin layer of that over the black metal, which I think really drove home the black of her eyes while still capturing that fact that they were still metallic of a statue rather than actual black eyes. For the large chunk of the base, this spaceship parts thing, I'm really struggling for a name for this other than it's just a bunch of random spaceship space debris parts all jammed together. Anyhow, so being silver, it looked boring. Now I could have went ahead and took the more of a traditional approach of taking a bunch of black wash, slapping it down into the recesses, and gave it more contrast with the black in there, and then went through and taken a brush, a dry brush with like a really bright silver and hit all the edges. I could have done that. That idea did not excite me. So I wanted some color in this, but also I wanted to absolutely make sure that the base didn't take away from the rest of the model. I wanted to make sure that Nebula was obviously the focus. It wasn't what this piece of space junk she was standing on was. So there's a balance here I was trying to find. And I took this warpwood bronze. I don't have it handy right now. With this warp bronze from Citadel, and started just spraying this a little haphazardly, but I was more focused down in the recesses where if I had went with a wash, kind of where those areas would be. And the more I did this, the more I actually liked this bronze on top of the silver. So after using more of a concentrated bronze into these deep areas, I started to reduce the bronze down. I started watering it down, making it thinner, and doing more of an overcoat on more of the area of the model of this portion of the base. So it had this almost very unique look to it depending on how you turned it. If you rotated it one way, it looked more silver, but if you rotated it this way, it had more of a bronze look to it, and it just had this almost color shifting effect, even though I didn't use any color shift paints or anything like that. I just used different intensities of this bronze on top of the silver, which I really liked how this turned out, rather than just doing that more of a traditional slap a wash on it and hit it with a dry brush approach. I liked how this turned out a lot. Towards the end, I was using almost pure water with just a little bit of this and just really spraying it over like the round nacelles, if you will, the round portions that are sticking out on each side, just to give it just a little bit more of a tint of bronze, but leaving those largely looking like they were silver. Like I said, anyhow, I really like how this portion of the base turned out. I thought it was just the right amount of interest without being too interesting to pull your attention away from Nebula. So getting towards the end of the build, assembly time, go ahead and I'm using my super glue on smaller parts like the hands and the arm, and then I'll use the combination of the E6000 and super glue on other parts. As I'm going ahead and assembling this, just some kind of final thoughts on how it all came together. The statue of a statue approach, I think, worked fine. I think that was probably the right choice to salvage a model rather than scrap it. And I'm glad I went that way over really trying to just kind of hammer through and still paint it up more like the quote traditional way that I would have that was my plan when I started this whole project, was to paint her up more traditionally and have her look like actual Nebula with the details on her outfit and that. So I'm glad I went with the statue of a statue approach. I think that was the right choice given the challenges of some of the gaps and the fittings of the lack of tight fittings in areas of the model. The area, there's two areas that I'm really not. I just dropped her arm there, so I'm trying to glue that together. So careful when you're gluing your parts. Make sure you had a firm grip on them. A couple thoughts on the overall appearance of the model. I'm not sure that the dual color on the bottom of the base, the ring of the blue and the purple, I'm not sure if that was the right call here. It looks a little disjointed, I guess, where my eye now, I feel like the whole time I've been saying what my eye is drawn to Nebula, not the base. Now I feel like I'm doing my attention is being pulled between the base and her. And that really wasn't what I was going for. I was just trying to kind of anchor those colors throughout the model. So I'm not 100% sure. In fact, I actually did not glue the round base to the space junk portion, in case I do decide later on to maybe reprint that base and do it in a more of a muted silver or something like that. So I didn't glue that portion together. So that was that's one of the areas that I'm just really, you look at it, I'm like, it looks nice, but it just takes away, it diverts my attention. So little struggle, internal artist struggle with that. I'd love to hear your thoughts, all your thoughts on how you feel, how that base, either makes the piece, doesn't make the piece, or what have you. And then the other area that I'm really was hemming and hawing on, going back and forth, is whether I should weather the piece. Right now it's very pristine, it's very shiny and new type of a statue. I could have went ahead and done some weathering on it. And when I thought about that, I'm like, well, what does space weathering look like? It's not rust, I don't think. This is probably be a material that wouldn't necessarily be rusty. I could do more of a corrosion to it. I struggled a little bit there. So I thought, you know what, that's something I can always do later on. I left the model in a way that I can go ahead and disassemble the portions and do the weathering on it without any big issues there. So again, love to hear your thoughts on how your approach would have been with the challenges with this model. Would you have scrapped it? Would you have said, you know what, my time's worth more than struggling with this model, I'm going to go grab a different one? Would you have powered through and painted it up traditionally? Or maybe you have even another idea I didn't even consider. So yeah, please let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But at this point, the model's done and it's ready to be put on display. If you made it to this part of the video, I want to thank you so much for sticking through the whole thing and listening to my thought process. And if you skipped ahead to the end of the video to see the final results, thank you for showing your interest in that. And if you want to find out how I ended up where the model looks like it does, go back and watch the rest of the video. It's fully explained on the whole thought process and why we landed where we landed. Again, thank you everyone so much, whether you're brand new to here, whether you watched my earlier videos. I am a new YouTuber, and I just cannot believe the amount of support and positivity and that you have all shown me. It's so appreciative, and I appreciate each and every one of you so much. So again, thank you so much. And I do promise that the next video will be back on track with more of a traditional painting video, more painting techniques rather than dealing with a thought process video. But either way, I'd love to know how you thought about this type of video and hearing what kind of goes through at least my head and my brain when I'm dealing with these problems, rather than just doing a straightforward painting video. So I'd love to hear your thoughts either way. And again, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.